For years, the palace has survived on one weapon more powerful than crowns or laws: silence. But in this story, Princess Anne doesn't just bend that rule, she shatters it. A single sentence. A single page. And suddenly, the family's most controversial fracture isn't rumor anymore, it's written. Not in press leaks, not in memoirs, in the Queen's own private words, and Anne is the one who decides the world deserves to hear them. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. It begins the way palace earthquakes always begin, quietly, almost politely, like a door closing with too much care. Anne isn't the type to dramatize her own footsteps. She's built her life on restraint, on keeping her face steady even when the world around her turns unstable. But this time, something slips. Not a confession, not a public outburst, just a fraction of hesitation that doesn't belong to her. The kind of pause that only happens when someone has read a truth that refuses to stay contained. People have spent decades trying to define Princess Anne with easy labels: tough, rigid, unshakable. The royal who doesn't perform emotion, who doesn't trade in soft statements. The one who never needed to be liked because she believed duty was worth more than applause. And that reputation matters here, because when someone like Anne looks shaken, it doesn't feel like gossip. It feels like an alarm. If she's rattled, it means the ground is moving under the palace itself. In this story, Anne doesn't stumble onto scandal by accident. She follows procedure. She respects rules. That's what makes it so devastating. She enters a space reserved for the kind of history that doesn't get printed, the kind that stays sealed because it could scorch the present. There are protocols, signatures, quiet observers who pretend they aren't watching. And then there's the thing that shouldn't exist, an envelope that wasn't meant to be discussed, wasn't meant to be found, wasn't meant to be opened by anyone who still has a beating heart. It's described in whispers as the Queen's final envelope, sealed not with ceremony but with intention. The kind of intention that doesn't come from affection, it comes from strategy. Anne knows the difference. She knows when something is written to comfort and when something is written to control damage. And when she sees the Queen's handwriting familiar, unmistakable, steady, she feels something colder than surprise. Recognition. Because the name inside isn't a distant figure. It isn't an abstract threat. It's family. It's Harry. And the words aren't the kind people expect from a grandmother in the public imagination. They don't read like softness. They read like awareness, sharp, unsentimental, and terrifyingly prepared. The question hits Anne like a weight dropping in her chest. What did the Queen really write about Harry's ending? Not his beginning, not his pain, his ending. As if the story was never drifting, as if it was being guided. And then, the stakes become unavoidable. One document can't just rewrite opinions, it can rewrite loyalties. It can rearrange the emotional architecture of the entire family. It can make heroes look calculated, and make villains look cornered. And Anne understands something else too. The moment she knows, she becomes a problem. Not because she's reckless, but because she's principled. Because she's the one royal who doesn't bluff. That's when the air changes, not with shouting, not with threats anyone can quote. Just the subtle shift of pressure like unseen hands moving pieces on a board. In this story, Anne doesn't need to see someone rushing toward her to know she's being boxed in. She feels it in the sudden courtesy, the sudden interest, the sudden closeness of people who were never close before. Someone is moving to stop her quietly, efficiently, as if this has been rehearsed. And if you think this begins with Harry, you're already behind, because the first secret isn't what the Queen wrote, it's who she trusted to protect it. Royal secrets don't sit in the open. They sleep in drawers with no keys, in rooms with no windows, guarded by tradition and fear. In this story, Anne finds a drawer that shouldn't exist, unlisted, unlogged, unspoken. Inside, the Queen's handwriting, unmistakable and sharp, and a date that lands like a warning. The message isn't sentimental, it's strategic. Almost final. And Anne realizes something terrifying. She wasn't meant to read it alone. The deeper Anne goes, the more the palace stops feeling like a home and starts feeling like a system that's been trained to protect itself from emotion. The archive isn't a dusty relic of the past, it's a controlled world where every movement is measured, every access is accounted for, every document has a trail like a shadow. There are protocols that sound harmless until you realize what they're really for. Not organization, but containment. Registers, signatures, quiet checks that look like routine but feel like surveillance. Even silence has rules in a place like this, and Anne can hear those rules pressing in on her, tightening with every step. She's fluent in that pressure. She's lived under it her entire life. That's why she notices the first crack, instantly, not a dramatic breach, not a blaring alarm, but a small inconsistency that shouldn't exist in a place built on exactness. A gap. A space where a record should be. A moment where the structure forgets to pretend it's perfect. Anne's eyes don't scan like a tourist. They calculate like someone who knows the cost of a missing line. She turns a page, then another, and there it is, a logbook entry that stops, and then resumes, as if someone erased a heartbeat from the record. The ink changes. The numbering stays neat, but the rhythm breaks. And Anne understands the implication in the only way an insider can: someone has already been here. That knowledge doesn't slow her down, it sharpens her. Because a missing entry isn't just a mistake in a palace, it's a signal. It means someone wanted the trail to vanish. It means the truth was handled before it reached her hands. And now Anne isn't just searching for a document, she's tracing a decision. Who accessed it? Who panicked? Who obeyed? The questions pile up, not neatly, but violently, like waves hitting a wall that refuses to collapse. Then she finds it, the sealed packet tucked where it shouldn't be, like a secret hidden inside another secret. It isn't labeled plainly. It isn't titled for history books. It's marked with a code phrase only a tiny circle would recognize, the kind of phrase that doesn't describe content but commands loyalty. Anne's throat tightens as she reads it, because she knows this language. This isn't the language of family. This is the language of the institution. A language designed not to comfort, but to control what comes next. When Anne breaks the seal, the first thing that hits her isn't scandal. It's tone. The Queen's handwriting is unmistakable, steady, deliberate, almost severe. But the voice behind it, that's what chills Anne. It doesn't sound like a grandmother speaking from the heart. It sounds like a commander writing from the edge of necessity. The words don't circle around feelings, they cut through them. They don't ask for understanding, they lay out terms. Anne can feel it as she reads. This is not a private reflection. This is a strategic directive dressed in personal ink. And then she sees the line that changes everything. Not a dramatic proclamation, not a melodramatic curse, something colder, more dangerous, because it's precise. A line that implies Harry's story has an endpoint planned, not by fate, not by mistake, but by design. As if the institution has been watching the same unfolding conflict and quietly writing its conclusion behind closed doors. Anne doesn't need to be told what that means. If a planned endpoint exists, then every public gesture, every statement, every silence, every manufactured calm could be part of the same machine guiding him toward it. The room doesn't feel smaller because of walls. It feels smaller because Anne can sense the invisible crowd around her, the watchers, the gatekeepers, the people who would smile politely while tightening the net. And just when she thinks the document is the whole truth, she feels it, the weight of something else inside the packet. A second item. An attachment, not a sentimental addendum, something structured, something specific, something that doesn't belong in a mere letter. Anne slides it out, expecting clarification, and instead she finds escalation. Evidence. A record, a piece that reframes the Queen's words from commentary into instruction. Because once Anne sees the attachment, she understands this isn't just a letter, it's a map of a controlled ending. Here's the problem with truth inside a monarchy. It's never just truth. It's a weapon. Anne knows that. She's lived her life as the Crown's shield, absorbing scandal, swallowing anger, keeping the machine smooth. But in this story, the Queen's words don't read like comfort. They read like verdict. And Anne's hands don't shake because she's afraid of Harry. They shake because she understands what this document could do to everyone, including the people she still loves. Anne has always been the one they rely on when emotions threaten to spill over the edges. The unemotional realist. The royal who doesn't soften reality to spare feelings, who doesn't indulge in theatrics, who doesn't need to be reassured. That's why the silence around her suddenly feels louder than any scandal. Because if Anne is rattled, it means the truth she's holding isn't ordinary. It isn't messy gossip. It's structured, purposeful. Like it was written to end an argument, not start one. The attachment lies beneath the Queen's handwriting like a second heartbeat, quiet, but impossible to ignore. Anne reads, then rereads, and a cold understanding spreads through her chest. There are only 3 paths from here, and all of them bleed. Destroy it, and she becomes the guardian of a lie, carrying it alone like a private curse. Bury it, and she becomes part of the machine that silenced Harry in the first place. Reveal it, and she lights a fuse that won't just scorch reputations, it will tear the family into factions that may never speak again. And the worst part is, Anne can't pretend she doesn't know. Knowledge in a monarchy isn't passive. It's a responsibility that comes with consequences. Pressure arrives the way palace pressure always arrives, politely. A private secretary figure doesn't barge in with threats. They drift close with careful concern, voice measured, questions wrapped in courtesy. All in order? Anything of note? Should I log your access? Each phrase is harmless on paper, but Anne hears the subtext. They already suspect something. Maybe they already know. Maybe the missing entry in the register wasn't an accident, it was a warning that someone else was here first, and they're still nearby. Anne keeps her voice steady, but inside the Queen's words keep echoing. They feel predictive, almost unnervingly so, like the Queen mapped out the public storm before it ever arrived. Not just interviews, not just memoirs. The backlash, the polarizing headlines, the way sympathy would surge and collapse, the way the institution would harden under scrutiny. It isn't written like an old woman reflecting on family pain. It's written like a strategist anticipating the next move in a long war, where feelings are real, but survival is the priority. Then Anne hits the phrase that snaps the meaning into place. Ending doesn't read like exile. It reads like containment, not removing someone from existence, removing them from influence, allowing presence, but controlling impact. A quiet, chilling compromise that sounds merciful if you don't understand power. Anne does understand it. She understands how a person can be kept close enough to silence, far enough to diminish, and surrounded by narratives that make resistance look like instability. The Queen's official voice was discipline measured, careful, never reckless. But in this story, the real Queen lives in the margins. Not the polite lines anyone might quote, the cramped, slanted notes she wrote when no one was watching. Anne reads the margins and feels her throat tighten, because the words aren't vague, they are specific, personal, and painfully aware. The Queen isn't guessing what happens to Harry, she's describing what must happen so the crown survives. And suddenly, Anne sees the split. The main text is controlled, formal, almost diplomatic. But the margins are where the truth breaks through. The margins contradict the calm surface. They speak of limits, of thresholds, of what the institution can tolerate before it turns ruthless. The Queen writes about the cost of sympathy like it's a currency the monarchy cannot afford to overspend. She writes about the public's hunger for a villain and how easily that hunger can be fed. She writes like someone who has carried the burden of being loved by millions and still knows love can become pressure, pressure can become rage, and rage can become a reckoning. There's a warning threaded through her notes, one that lands like a bruise. Harry's role, as he's chosen it, is incompatible with a controlled narrative. Not because he's weak, but because he's unpredictable. Because he speaks when silence is expected. Because he refuses to wear pain like a ceremonial uniform. And in the Queen's handwriting, Anne senses something heartbreakingly human, one line that doesn't read like policy at all, but like restrained grief. Love, but boundaries. Affection, but not permission. A grandmother's ache sealed inside a monarch's discipline. Then comes the coded reference, the point of no return tied to a single event the Queen marks as irreversible. Anne doesn't need the details spelled out to feel the weight of it. The Queen is saying there was a moment where the family stopped being a family and became sides. A moment where reconciliation became an appearance rather than a reality. And Anne realizes with a sick twist that the institution didn't just react to that moment, it absorbed it, studied it, and turned it into a playbook. That's when the air shifts again. Someone close to Anne, someone who should be safe, offers to help. Their tone is gentle, their intent dressed in loyalty, but their hands move a little too quickly toward the packet. Just let me secure it. Let me take it. Let me handle the burden for you. And Anne feels that betrayal doesn't always arrive as an attack. Sometimes it arrives as assistance. Sometimes it smiles. Because once another name appears in the Queen's margins, another person positioned not as a bystander, but as an accelerant, everything changes. The story stops being Harry versus the palace, and becomes palace versus palace. And that's when Anne understands the scariest truth of all. This secret already has guardians, just not the ones you'd expect. One line. That's all it takes to flip the entire narrative. In this story, the Queen writes a sentence that, on first read, sounds kind, almost forgiving. But Anne reads it twice, and the warmth vanishes. Because the line isn't mercy, it's policy. A controlled outcome disguised as compassion. And suddenly Harry's ending doesn't mean tragedy or banishment, it means something colder. A future where he's allowed to exist, but never allowed to matter. Anne's breath doesn't catch, because the words are cruel in the obvious way. They're cruel in the careful way. The kind of cruelty that wears gloves, that speaks softly while tightening a grip. The clause is written as if it's protection, recognition, respect, inclusion in name. But beneath that polished surface is the real intent, sharp as steel. Harry is to be recognized and removed from influence. Not erased, not publicly shunned, not made into a martyr, just gently, permanently relocated to the edge of relevance, allowed to live in the story, but never again allowed to shape it. And Anne understands the institutional logic immediately, because she's watched it work for decades. Presence can be managed, presence can be photographed, scheduled, contained. But influence? Influence is wildfire. Influence spreads through emotion, through sympathy, through rebellion, through the dangerous possibility that one person's refusal might inspire another's. The crown can survive distance. What it cannot survive is precedent. And in the Queen's handwriting, Anne sees the fear that never makes it into speeches, the fear that Harry isn't just Harry. He's a template, a permission slip, proof that a royal can step outside the script and still command attention. That possibility is the real threat, because once one person breaks the pattern, others start wondering what else is breakable. The most haunting part is that the Queen doesn't write Harry as a villain. She acknowledges pain in a way Anne can't ignore, an almost restrained tenderness, as if the Queen is admitting in private what the institution can't afford to admit in public. That he is wounded, that some of it is deserved, that the family's silence wasn't always wisdom, sometimes it was avoidance dressed as tradition. But even that recognition doesn't change the conclusion. The Queen's words draw a hard boundary. Sympathy cannot rewrite the system. Love can exist quietly, privately, but it cannot be allowed to reshape the crown. Then Anne finds the mechanism. It's not spelled out like a threat, but it's there, an implied trigger, a contingency clause that activates if Harry crosses certain lines publicly. Not a single interview, not one emotional confession. Something more specific: if he challenges the institution's legitimacy, if he undermines its future, if he pushes the narrative beyond repair. Anne can feel the cold precision of it. This isn't just about managing headlines. It's about ensuring there is always a lever to pull, always a response ready, always a way to reduce impact without causing an explosion. And then the second punch lands quietly, devastatingly, because Anne spots evidence that the clause wasn't merely written as a plan. It was treated like a policy already in motion. A note. A reference. A small clinical mark that implies steps were taken, conversations had, doors closed in ways the public would never see. It's the kind of thing that doesn't scream conspiracy to outsiders, but to Anne it's unmistakable. The ending wasn't just imagined. It was being implemented. Anne doesn't get scared easily. That's why the midnight call hits like a gunshot in silence. No caller ID, no greeting, just a voice that knows where she is, what she read, and what she's thinking about doing next. In this story, that's the moment Anne realizes she's not holding a secret. The secret is holding her. And the palace isn't asking for loyalty anymore. It's demanding obedience. The voice doesn't shout. It doesn't need to. It uses a phrase only insiders would know, something ceremonial, something coded, something that immediately narrows the circle of suspects. Anne's pulse stays controlled, but her mind races. Courtiers, security, family, people who smile in daylight and tighten ropes in the dark. The caller delivers the warning like a law carved into stone. Some truths are treason, even when they're written. And in that instant, Anne realizes the palace doesn't fear lies. It fears uncontrolled truth. She hangs up and makes a decision that shocks even her, not out of rebellion, out of survival. She doesn't keep one copy. She makes two. She hides them in separate locations, like splitting a heart into pieces so no one can crush it in one blow. It's a move that feels almost criminal inside a world built on obedience. But Anne isn't playing games anymore. She's protecting evidence from the very machine that created it. And as she moves, she feels the old weight of her promise to the Queen, the vow to protect the crown and the family, and the bitter realization that those two duties no longer point in the same direction. Then the pressure becomes physical. A knock that's too timed. A presence that's too close. A request that sounds routine but lands like a trap. Someone is coming for the packet, not with drama, not with force in the obvious sense, but with authority, with procedure, with the quiet certainty that Anne will comply, because she always has. And for a heartbeat, she almost does. Almost. Because the conditioning runs deep. But this time she doesn't move like a servant of the system. She moves like a woman who finally understands what the system does to people it decides must be contained. And if it's already activated, then the real question becomes terrifyingly simple. Who pushed the button first? Because now it's not just about what the Queen wrote, it's about who will ruin Anne to keep it buried. In stories like this, you expect the truth to liberate the victim. But when Harry's side learns what the Queen wrote, it doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like a sentence finally explained. Because the Queen's words don't just describe what happened, they predict what will happen next. And suddenly Harry isn't fighting rumours anymore, he's fighting a plan. A plan designed to outlast interviews, outlast outrage, and outlast him. It doesn't arrive like a headline or a dramatic announcement. It arrives the way the most dangerous information always arrives, quietly, indirectly, with just enough urgency to feel like a warning, and just enough uncertainty to feel like a trap. A messenger doesn't come wearing official authority. The message slips into Harry's circle through a side door, a careful leak, a trusted voice, a note passed with trembling hands, and a single unspoken instruction: read this, and don't let anyone see your face when you do. And when Harry finally absorbs the words, the reaction isn't shock. It's recognition. Not the kind that comforts, but the kind that confirms a fear you've tried to outrun for years. His silence isn't calm, it's restraint. Because the Queen's phrasing doesn't read like a spontaneous judgment, it reads like something prepared long before the world ever realized there was a war. It reads like the institution studied him, predicted him, and wrote his options down as if he were a risk to be managed rather than a grandson to be understood. Then comes the twist that cuts deepest. There's affection in the writing, real, unmistakable, almost painfully human. A line that acknowledges love, that hints at tenderness, that carries the weight of someone who did care. But it still rejects him. It still places the crown above the person. It's the kind of love that doesn't save you. The kind that can look gentle on the surface, while it quietly closes the door and locks it from the inside. And Harry feels the humiliation of it, not because he wanted sentiment, but because he realizes the affection was never meant to change the outcome. It was meant to make the outcome easier to swallow. He wants to strike back. Of course he does. In that moment, every instinct screams for a counterattack, something public, something undeniable, something that forces the palace to answer in daylight. But then the trigger mechanism becomes real in his mind, like a wire stretched across the path he's about to take. Because he can see it now, the plan anticipates outrage. It anticipates interviews. It anticipates grand statements. It was built to survive noise. And the cruelest part is that the plan doesn't have to defeat him in an argument, it only has to frame his resistance as proof that he's unstable, disloyal, dangerous. A man confirms his own label the moment he tries to tear it off. The emotion turns volatile. Grief collides with rage. Betrayal mixes with an almost unbearable clarity. Harry isn't reading himself as family, he's reading himself as a risk. Not a person, but a problem, a variable, a precedent. And that word precedent hits like a curse, because he understands what the Queen feared, not just his story, but what his story could inspire inside the monarchy. If one royal steps out and survives, others might follow. If one voice refuses silence, others might find their own. And that's why influence is treated like fire, not because it burns the palace down overnight, but because it spreads. So Harry does the most dangerous thing of all. He doesn't react immediately. He thinks. He calculates. He starts forming a response that isn't just emotional, it's strategic. A response that could burn bridges permanently, not with screaming, but with precision. He imagines a message that doesn't beg to be understood, one that forces the world to see patterns, to notice inconsistencies, to recognize the machinery behind the smiles. And as that response takes shape, a grim truth settles over him. If he sends it, there may be no path back. If he doesn't, the plan wins quietly. The last page doesn't read like a letter. It reads like a confession written with a steady hand. In this story, the Queen doesn't just talk about Harry, she points to the invisible architect of the entire crisis. A person the public would never suspect. A person with access, motive, and a smile polished for cameras. Anne stares at the name, and for the first time, her loyalty doesn't feel like honor. It feels like complicity. Because Anne sees in brutal clarity what the document is really doing. It isn't simply describing a breakdown. It's identifying a handler figure, someone shaping outcomes behind the scenes, guiding narratives, applying pressure where the public would never notice. And what devastates Anne isn't just the accusation. It's the implication that the Queen saw it too. Saw manipulation. Saw the architecture of control. And still allowed it, because stability mattered more than fairness, and silence felt safer than upheaval. Anne starts recognizing patterns she once dismissed as how things work, the same headlines appearing at the same time, the same talking points echoed by different voices, the same strategic silences that somehow speak louder than statements. It's all there, threaded through the Queen's notes like a quiet admission that the family didn't just stumble into this crisis, they managed it, directed it, and, when necessary, engineered it. And in the margins there's a contingency like a loaded weapon. If this ever surfaces, deny it, discredit the source, divide the audience, and let the noise swallow the truth whole. That's when Anne finally understands why the pressure around her has felt so coordinated, so immediate, so intimate. This secret doesn't just have enemies, it has guardians, people assigned formally or informally to keep it contained at any cost. And now Harry is preparing a response that could detonate everything, while Anne is holding the page that proves the battle was never as simple as one man versus the palace. It was always palace versus palace. Power versus power. Strategy versus blood. And in the tightest, coldest moment of clarity, Anne chooses her own line in the sand, not because she wants chaos, because she can't carry complicity like it's duty anymore. The only way out is to speak, but not through the palace, not through the carefully approved channels designed to soften and sanitize. If she's going to tell the truth in this story, it has to be somewhere the institution can't rewrite in real time. And that decision creates the final storm, because once Anne goes public, the monarchy doesn't respond with truth, it responds with war. When the story breaks, it doesn't land like gossip, it lands like an earthquake. In this fictional expose, the palace doesn't argue the content, because arguing gives it oxygen. Instead, it attacks the messenger. Anne's credibility. Anne's motives. Anne's stability. And that's the cruel genius of power. It doesn't need to win the truth. It only needs to win the noise. But Anne doesn't flinch, because she knows exactly what the Queen wrote about endings. At first, the response is so subtle that many people miss it, because the palace has mastered the art of sounding gentle while sharpening the blade. The language is soft, almost sympathetic. Concern, they say, as if this is about Anne's well-being, not the institution's survival. Misinterpretation, they suggest, as if the words were foggy, not deliberate. Private grief, they whisper, as if the real crime isn't control, but speaking too loudly around the dead. It's a campaign designed to feel humane, to look like protection, to smell like decency while quietly positioning Anne as unstable, impulsive, and emotionally compromised. The message isn't shouted, it's planted. And soon it spreads through the press like a stain that can't be scrubbed out. Anne feels the consequences in the way the world around her changes shape. Invitations that once arrived automatically simply stop. Calls that used to be answered are now met with delays, then silence, then nothing at all. The corridors of loyalty don't erupt into open hostility, they become colder, emptier. Allies vanish without explanation, not because they hate her, but because they fear being seen near her. Doors still open, but only halfway. Smiles still appear, but they don't reach the eyes. It's isolation executed with perfect etiquette, no public condemnation, no dramatic exile, just the slow, suffocating removal of belonging. And Anne understands the cruelty of it. The palace doesn't have to destroy you loudly. It only has to make you feel alone until you question your own reality. Meanwhile, Harry's position becomes more dangerous with every passing hour. Because now, the plan has a new advantage. Anything he does can be framed as proof. If he speaks, he's attacking. If he stays silent, he's scheming. If he shows emotion, he's unstable. If he shows restraint, he's calculated. The trap tightens because the narrative has been built to win either way, and Harry can sense it. The truth that was supposed to free him has instead placed him under a brighter, harsher light one, controlled by the same hands that wrote the rules. He isn't fighting people anymore. He's fighting a system that can turn any move into a confession. And then the emotional peak hits Anne like a wave she can't step away from. As the backlash grows, as the polite knives sharpen, as the whispers harden into headlines, she realizes something terrifying. The Queen's document predicted this. Not in vague terms, not as a general warning, but in the precise rhythm of reaction. The denial wrapped in empathy, the discrediting disguised as concern, the division seeded among the public so no single version of reality can hold. Anne reads the words again and feels the chill of inevitability, like she's watching a machine execute a program written long ago. The Queen didn't just anticipate a storm. She outlined the path the storm would take, and she understood exactly how the institution would behave when cornered. That realization doesn't just break Anne's heart. It hardens her resolve, because now she knows the palace isn't improvising. It's following a script. Then comes the final twist, the one that reframes everything people thought this story was about. The ending isn't Harry's. Not really. The ending is the family's innocence, the last fragile illusion that blood automatically means protection, that love is stronger than image, that the monarchy's public softness reflects private warmth. That innocence dies here, not with a scandal, but with a strategy. Because once you see how power moves when threatened, you can never unsee it. And Anne, of all people, knows that's the real cost of truth. It doesn't just expose a secret, it changes the person who learns it. But even as the noise swallows the air, Anne keeps one last detail locked away, one piece she didn't reveal, one line she refused to place into the public storm. Not because it's insignificant, because it's too significant, because it doesn't just implicate a handler or expose a mechanism, it touches something deeper, something that could trigger consequences even she isn't ready to unleash. And that final restraint becomes its own cliffhanger. Because it raises the most unsettling possibility of all, maybe the Queen wanted it this way. Maybe she wrote not just for revelation, but for leverage. Because the most haunting part isn't what Anne revealed, it's what she didn't. And why the Queen may have wanted it that way. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.